like herding cats. No.
Yeah, herding cats to get in here, I guess. So let's do a little bit of recap because I think that we lobbed a bit of information out into the community and there was some response. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about like just a brief primer on like what we did and why we did it.
Let's talk about who's here first.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was
Let's
gonna say.
So nice to see you all so soon. I'm Brian Pace. Hi, Nishay.
Hey, Brian.
How you doing, Brian Normand?
I'm doing well.
How's it going, Dave Nichols?
Things are good, thanks.
So what are we all talking about today?
We're talking about our statement that we put out as a team. It's published
right.
And that's one thing that I found. It's called we refuse to endorse Daniel Pinchbeck as a credible voice in the psychedelic movement. And one thing I find really interesting is for the people who reacted very harshly to it, it's our lack of endorsement. It almost seems like they feel like he's entitled to our endorsement, which I find really odd.
Maybe they find him credible. Maybe they feel like 2012 came, went, they broke open their heads and they're ready to move to cold fusion generators.
Can we do a little primer here on some background?
Yeah, let's do it. I can provide some of the basic details.
Okay, I mean, you started this whole, you threw the whole first punch.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was aware of who Daniel Pinchbeck was, for a long time because he was one of these voices out there. I never really paid much attention to him because having lived and worked in Mayan communities, I thought he was sort of not a useful voice in the conversation around that kind of thing. But I was aware that he was, a journalist. Ultimately, the basic thing that happened is in 2017, he got online and said that he was somebody who habitually was predatory and creepy and had, exhibited a pattern of behavior by his own admission.
Let's emphasize also the line using psychedelics as tools of seduction.
Yeah, which somebody commented, it was a long-winded say of drugged rape. And so ultimately I was aware of that. That happened. But what I wasn't aware of was that that somebody I was collaborating with at the time thought that was something that, someone can come back from, and decided to have an event with Daniel Pinchbeck, his first event, as far as I can tell, after making an admission like that to the community.
Right, and in terms of coming back from, I think we should emphasize too that there is reasonable people can disagree on the extent of coming back and when, but it was so soon and there was such little evidence that anything had changed.
Right. Yeah. So, there's nothing going on. So ultimately within the third wave, there were people who were pushing back behind the scenes. We weren't aware. Essentially the way that I saw it was nobody had informed me as to whether or not this was coming, and I wanted nothing to do with Daniel Pinchbeck. And so I, without speaking to anybody at the third wave, essentially publicly disassociated myself because that's the only thing that I could do. In the hopes that the people that are in my network and who understand what it is that I stand for would not see me associated with somebody who's an admitted sexual abuser, because that's morally abhorrent to me. I don't support it. I have a very strong belief that we should believe women and survivors, and in this case, let's just believe the person who outed themselves as a serial abuser. So that event was canceled through community pressure.
This was back in January.
This was back in January of this year. This was 11 months ago. And, we were pleased in the sense that I don't think that somebody like that is good for the movement, and B, I think that we have to, in this post Me Too world, we have to have some sort of change, or else what is that what does that say about all of us, about this discussion that we don't care about survivors of sexual abuse? So I'm just not down with that.
Yeah, and just also, I mean, I feel like that early shit show, ultimately in terms of like reactions on Facebook and social media, helped to congeal this group in the sense that there were very clear fault lines that people were kind of self-organizing in. Some people felt like the people who felt that this was problematic were the problems because we're just trying to drudge up stuff and are egoic. And then other people were like very quick to say, no, like, why is this happening, etc. So it definitely directly links to what we're doing today in general.
Sure. And I mean, I think a lot of us sort of smeared us or a lot of folks out there tried to smear us as, leftist cancel culture, proponents. And I think there's a lot of confusion about, what cancel culture and cancellation really is. And also like, whether or not any of this has anything to do with free speech. So, I mean, basically like Daniel's a published author who's sold lots of copies of his books. He shows up at different festivals and has for years been, public speaker. I don't really have any power to silence or desire really to silence Daniel Pinchbeck, but do I want to contribute to the manufacture of his fame? No. Do I want to sit by while people I personally know contribute to his fame without saying something about it? No. And so that's really what's going on here.
And also, were people that you personally know were victimized as a result of how he wielded that fame.
Yes. So these kinds of fault lines in the community that popped up over him, it would have been one thing if myself and the majority of the third wave broke with Paul Austin, who after the event cancellation was very clear, like 100% clear on Twitter the following day, that Daniel Pinchbeck's ideas were important and should be amplified despite his own admissions to being a habitual and serial abusers, in his own word, over and over. Okay. And I guess at that point, like, it's fair to ask, well, how important and prophetic and prescient are Daniel Pinchbeck's ideas in the first place? I mean, this is a guy who way back in 2012 was positioning himself as a reincarnation of Quetzalcoatl and
a reincarnation of Terrence McKenna and Time Wave Zero. Like that was the equivalent of Time Wave Zero.
It was some fucking, boring psychedelic apocalyptica. And like the fact that he's still, somehow something that anybody thinks is credible in terms of talking about psychedelics or what we should be doing with our collective future. Like, I'm baffled. Okay.
I'd like to make a point on what I've experienced over the last 2 years in doing this now is,
what do you mean by this? Do you mean like event production or just being involved with the scene? Or...
In the reaction of sexual assault conversations over the last 2 years, in 2018 and 2019, I've seen, while there's been a lot of support for the women, what I have seen is that there is this strong desire to defend the men, a strong desire to be apologists for them. And I have seen, it's like when we go out and we discuss one of these abusers, there's this strong reaction to defending the men while not wanting to support the women at all. And this response was felt quite widely when Horizons removed Neil Goldsmith.
Yeah.
There was a stronger desire to defend him. And what are you guys doing? And and it was gross. It was really gross.
I mean, and it's, I don't know what's up to date on that, but that's been a long unfurling process that has, in my opinion, put a lot of weight on the victims and survivors of his action, right? Like, so when they try to do some sort of like transformative justice or restorative justice or whatever sort of supposedly peer-to-peer discussion
a
group,
path back, a
right?
path back to the community, you know.
The problem is the way that it's situated when you're talking about older, more affluent figures in the community who have the time and material resources, and in some cases attorneys, that can show up and sit through that and not have it really affect their schedule overall, right? They recognize this, as Patrick discussed about Daniel, as like, these are the components that needed to be done in order to get to some sort of apology, so I can wait this out. But when you've got a bunch of younger women who have schedules and live in places that don't necessarily afford them the ease of commute, and they're the people who have had the difficult, if not traumatic, experiences, and then have to do all the emotional labor of reliving that and bearing that and dealing with skeptical, older, generally males who are prodding that and probing that and, you know, attacking that and setting it up in you know, basically presenting the process as though it's neutral and impartial and designed to give everyone a say so that we can have some sort of healing. And yet it completely misses the point in that somebody transgressed, right? This is not, everybody is not on the same footing in the first place, just around the event, let alone the material circumstances. And so one of the things that I think, and it's not just psychedelic spaces, but one of the things that I think has really gotten screwed up in this is the lack of centering of the victims and the survivors, and this sense that this is a neutral platform, when it's like, if we're looking for reintegration of perpetrators into communities or societies, if we're talking larger contexts, there has to be some sort of acknowledgement of that transgression in a way, and this notion that it can be handled internally between friends and peers and colleagues. The fact that there's an aversion to going outside, like outside of people's communities and like these institutions, the organizations that are putting the funds or the people forward to make these things happen. There are collectives that do this work, you know, that have focused on doing this work, and even those collectives acknowledge how frequently it goes wrong.
Sure. Here's the thing, though. I mean, there's a lot of narratives that have come back on several of these issues with abusers in the community that are just classic rape culture stuff, where, you know, the question, beyond just centering the survivors, the question very quickly orbits back to the idea that these like shitty men who also, you know, are somehow contributing works of genius or crucial community functions,
works of crucial, like irreplaceable, is
right,
the kind of like attitude that this person is so important that it justifies everything that they've done,
and that we're somehow like ruining their lives. Mm-hmm. And with regard to, you know, the subject of our non-endorsement, you know, we're talking about somebody who's already been quite successful in life. From his own writings, seems to have been affluent his entire career, and from his own admissions, like, should really just be happy he's not in jail. So the idea that, you know, we're ruining anybody's lives, it's just ridiculous. We're sharing an opinion, we're part of this community, and we're concerned about people who want to exploit more vulnerable, you know, members of it, and we're speaking up so that doesn't go unnoticed.
Well, I just wanted to say, there are also, I mean, so many women who have left the community who could have contributed, who were brilliant and wanted to be involved, and then not only were they dealing with sexist treatment and not being taken seriously, but just like having that culture supported. It's like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to.
He's continuing to be highlighted on different platforms.
Look, I had perhaps one of the most high-profile people involved with psychedelics straight up tell me that, you know, Daniel should be at events and like, sorry. I had one of the most high profile people in psychedelics essentially asserting Daniel's right, privilege, whatever, to participate in events, and seemed totally oblivious and unaware of like how that would affect other people. Like why is his right to be there that much greater than anyone else's? There was also Brian Pace, you had just said when you were talking about the women, I had a follow-up about how some of this is played out with regards to, sorry.
Because I know that some of the women who were preyed on by him have things that they can share and say that are important. And I feel like that should be the focus of, oh, maybe they haven't been speaking up and coming to conferences because this has happened to them. How about we reach out to those people and lift those people up and support their careers? Why is the focus on supporting his career over theirs?
So I want to bring back to some of the basics because, Nishay mentioned that some people may be hearing about this from this episode and have not read the statement. And so what happened after, we thought, okay, great. We've dealt with Pinchbeck. There were resignations over this guy's, terrible behavior.
Majority of the third wave left, right?
Yes.
And they put out their own statement.
And they put out their own statement. Reading. Right. And so we figured, okay, well, this is great. I think we've probably dealt with, at least on some sort of, public process, what to do with this individual, which is to not, provide space. And then we saw a very, very friendly article come out of Chacruna with Daniel, that, the preface of the article is that they took a compassionate approach to Daniel in particular, and they situated it as they were asking him questions about how to address and confront sexual assault in the psychedelic community. It was the most bizarre thing I had ever read on this topic,
So I remembered what I was going to say earlier, which is that like part of why it felt super important to me, even at this point, to like get something out there is so that it's on the public record, right? So that you can't have folks, whether it's Chacruna or anyone else, saying, oh, we didn't know about that, or
right.
we were unaware that these were things that had happened. At this point, it was already quite public, but at this point, there's now, hopefully that much more stuff out there that
right.
A lot of
it should be part of his resume at this point because he put it out there himself. And, if we're to comment on him claiming to be an Aztec god, we might as well comment on the fact that while he was doing all of that, he was using whatever dubious fame that he had to exploit young women. Like throughout that career, it should be colored by it because it was all happening at the same time.
Right. And let's stress too that this is not just a situation where a guy was a little clumsy with girls or, a little bit egotistical. If you look at the threads of the responses to us posting that article, people, the majority, I would say, of the comments are, I knew it, years ago, decades ago.
It was an open secret.
Yeah, he's one of these guys. It's an open secret because it's that universal in terms of his actions and that, relentless and obvious. And so this is not just a one-off situation. This is a practiced predator who self-admittedly hated women. So it's not, that's one thing that I've seen people talk about. It's not just about his goal is, in his recent writings, his approach to dealing with it, his PR angle is that he knows now that this is a systemic issue with sexism in our culture, and he positions himself as being the guy to fix that situation.
It's a classic tactic. If you're you've got some shit on you from something that you did and people are upset, you get out and you do the mea culpa publicly and you control the narrative. And Daniel had attempted to do that. And I think that, I was surprised that anybody from the third wave would have considered, I just didn't think that was, that we had that different of values, that was the case. But, he seemed poised to start sort of an apology tour where he gets to be the person who The story now is, and it still is, you see from his many supporters, that the story is, well, Daniel has shown such, courage and vulnerability, and he should be supported and honored. It's like the guy said he was a fucking rapist. Like, I just don't. I mean, he actually, to be fair, he said that he had never non-consensually did any any sexual behavior with women, and then followed it up. And this is actually why we have carefully used his words. He has used drugs as tools of seduction. Somebody commented, and I agree with them, that that's a really long-winded way of saying drugged rape. And but you have to engage with it, because people unfortunately have bad reactions to calling things what they are, especially when powerful men are denying that that's the case, when they're parsing these words.
And people, some people who don't get it, the vast majority, like I was saying, of responses were people who had a story themselves, knew someone, saw something, and other people who had heard of him but didn't know about this. So I think,
right,
and wanted to. People whose decision making about, supporting him, this is a piece of information that actually matters to them. So it is significant to be able to put it out there and say, this is happening. And a lot of people are framing this as other people, as we are just like angry, egotistical, like the attention, bullies.
We're bullies.
Yeah, we're the bullies. But, it's like we would honestly rather be doing other things. Like, this is not the thing that we would choose out of all of the options to be doing.
Well, and that brings us really to the present, because we caught wind that Daniel was going to be having an event in Brooklyn again, and there wasn't really any discussion. We weren't sitting here going like, well, how do we cancel it? But what we did say is, well, we can't just sit here and not say anything, not come back to the fact that it's been less than a year than the last time this person tried to enter the spotlight, have an event, that it went down in flames because the psychedelic community said, we see you and we're not happy about you being here. And so the organizers just ran from it, and there's all this tremendous fallout. And so we wanted to put it all in one place, because it's exhausting. But as Nishay was saying, like, yeah, I could have done some other things with my time earlier this week. But annoyance is a powerful motivator for action. I just don't like to see that kind of stuff slide by.
It also, we don't want to be complicit in that.
No.
Right. And
it's time you have to put your foot down.
Complicit.
And it seems important, especially as psychedelics are getting increased awareness and are increasingly in mainstream view, putting this out there, partly because there are so many new people flocking to this that are coming to psychedelics thinking that they're wonder drugs or panaceas or miracle cures, and not really having great discernment. And it's not just that, like, Daniel Pinchbeck abused some people, and that's just this lone skeleton in the psychedelic closet. It's like, no, sexual misconduct and psychedelics go hand in hand, and we see it in arenas of practitioners. We see it with MAPS affiliated therapists. We've seen it historically in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. I mean, this is a huge problem, and this is one tiny little aspect of it. And getting it out there, partly to link to all of these other things and show, look, there's a huge web of issues facing psychedelic communities around this stuff. If there's not that awareness there, to my mind, there's not much potential for meaningful engagement.
And it's easier for people like him, who there are still many people active in the field, to predate on other people. But the more that we put attention on the fact of this and how rampant it is, the more eyes are on it, then the more difficult it will be for predators.
And the fact of the matter is you could not have chosen a more open and closed situation. We're not dealing with allegations here. We're not dealing with he said, she said here. We're dealing with Daniel's own words. Daniel Pinchbeck decided to tell everyone about his own self-identified, creepy, predatory, and illegal you know, violent behavior. Like, it just, I don't understand how there's confusion over this, you know?
And the thing is, it's not even because his solution, you know, in How Soon Is Now, is to have women be more accessible to multiple men, essentially, you know, to have less of a competition around it by making the supply less scarce. But as someone said about Harvey Weinstein, connection and intimacy is not the point here. The point here is having power over others and being able to exert that power. You know, and he said part of it was lashing out at women who he felt had spurned him in the past, like a lot of these shooters, these incels, you know, feeling like, you know, he was getting back at them in some way. And these are not issues that are going to be patched over by some kind of polyamorous utopia.
Sure. And I mean, I'm personally sort of annoyed at his mutilation of Sex at Dawn, which is a fantastic book. To see it be put to the service of a really poor reading of it, first of all, and you know, people should read Sex at Dawn. It's a great book, but not because Daniel Pinchbeck's using it to excuse his terrible behavior. So, are we done here? I hope we're done here.
Yeah, I hope we're done. I was about to say that too. You know, if we need to put out, you know, another statement, we will. Hopefully, we won't have to.
I mean, I think, yeah.
But we're gonna have to continue these, like we've said, these things happen in a field that is supposed to be about trauma.
Among other things.
About healing trauma or healing and everything. If you can't talk about these things,
and we need to deal with
I don't
it
know what the
in-house
point
first,
of it is.
You know, we can't try to save the world when we're having such a dysfunctional base to start with. And I just want to also include before we wrap that, you know, as someone that this had actually happened to with Pinchbeck, writing about this stuff is not easy for me, and it's pretty emotionally draining and hard, and, you know, affects the other work that I'm doing. And I just wanted to say to the people who did speak out in support of us putting that statement out, like, I really appreciate that. Like, that means the world to me. And, you know, I think that the more that we can speak out in compassionately for each other, and to witness when people are speaking up about harms and support that, I think that the trolls and etc. will have a harder time to sow seeds of division.
Yeah, I think there's also enough people who've experienced this stuff that, like, as we start talking to each other about it, I mean, the chorus of voices seems to grow louder every time this comes up again. Hopefully this is the last time with Pinchbeck, but, you know, there's certainly plenty of other stuff to talk about in this arena.
But as someone said about Weinstein, you know, when at the recent thing that he came out to in New York, like, the woman who spoke out, like, she felt supported, but this is such a black and white situation where people now view him as this, like, pariah. But she's like, but I'd hope that someone more popular, if this were happening as well, I would also be supported.
Right. We had talked about this in the statement as well, but, you know, the reality of the Me Too conversation is it put a spotlight not just on the abusers and the survivors, but the entire network and system and, you know, rationale for everyone just sort of going along to get along, because we're dealing with, in these cases, we're dealing with power. We're dealing with people that have influence or some kind of dubious celebrity. Anything in this case can be used by abusers to protect themselves. And so, I mean, in this case, we just wanted to sort of put everything together in terms of the debate that had happened over the last 11 years, and also just sort of point to, I do that all the time.
You've done it twice.
Point to the players, like, who, like, so Alchemist Kitchen in this case was the venue, and Alchemist Kitchen has had historically a professional relationship with Daniel Pinchbeck. So of course it makes sense that they might be willing to platform him, but it's also somewhat doubtful that they somehow were not aware of this openest secrets that Daniel Pinchbeck himself publicized. So it's just, it's just, I thought it was useful to, as a microcosm, but also as just like, so that we who are annoyed and exhausted by this debate have something that we can just point to whenever somebody says, hey, what's the deal here?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and that alibi of we didn't know, we hadn't
We
heard,
didn't know.
becomes less and less tenable.
Yeah, it's part of his resume.
Well, thanks
So.
guys. Thanks for hearing us out, and we appreciate the support. And
Yeah, we'll put the relevant articles in the show notes.
yeah, we should link to the third wave departing.
We'll link to all of
statement.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
All
That's
right.
our cue.
So long, y'all.
See ya.
Peace.
All right.
Okay, are you still recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I think that, geez, like, other people will probably say, well, geez, like, now you really are bullies because you had to make a whole video about it, but I don't care. Like, we put a nail in the coffin. Like, I think it's exhaustive, but like, this is now the third time this year that I've spent multiple days like dealing with fucking Daniel Pinchbeck's bullshit. So let's just put it in the ground.
Also, like, our point about people like wanting to make sure that people have heard about this, like, it makes sense to do it in multiple media formats.
I agree. And we did it while it was fresh. So I'm glad that we decided to.
Yeah, we're not like harping on it as like this theme of ours, forever. It's just like we're dealing with it and hopefully can move on.
We're going
Also,
to go on.
These are issues of like political philosophies and like organizational things, and like like thinking about 1930 Spain, like the people with differing political philosophies were running around killing each other.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like I'm okay with recognizing that there's going to be some like inherent antagonism between us and some of the trolls and people like that.